the first thing that's coming to our mind is the difference between the men in Ireland and in Jerusalem or in
Yeah,
Israel.
yeah.
There's just a huge difference in how they treated the women and the role of the women and all that kind of thing.
Well, sort of to start with, it's we're given a very myopic view of that period of history according to historians. It's very myopic. It tends to look at the context of Judaism or the context of the religion du jour, which leads into, of course, Catholicism and religion and Christianity anyway. So it follows that thread historically of looking at Jerusalem as being specifically a narrow lens of Judaism and a narrow lens of Sadducees and Pharisees and Sanhedrin, and it doesn't look at all the other aspects. Just like at the moment, one could say, if I was to take, for example, Byron Bay, if one was only to look at the Christian groups in Byron Bay and not the massive diversity of different philosophies and ideologies that are going on around it, one is denying the anthropology of an entire region. So through the research, I mean, I won't even go into what started it, but through the research, concern was this the research goes back to Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which started in the 80s. So this was 20 years worth of research leading to this story. And a lot of it had also to do with my knowledge of so-called Western mystery traditions, right from the current era of the Golden Dawn, all the way into deep history to Moses de Leon, and from there to the diaspora in Jerusalem, to attempt to get an understanding of what was Paulist material, what was Assayan material, and what may have been propaganda that was promoted as a result of the Paulist behavior, particularly when they hit the mainland, which was where Christianity was formed from Mithraism.
Yeah, you talked about
Because the Roman soldiers' so-called god was Mithra.
that.
And understanding that Mithra's birthday was the same as Jesus, that born in a stable, born in a cave, all of this information has been accumulating into kaleidoscopic patterns that I automatically see research to have a bigger picture, to not be biased by simply one historic account. I need to take in 10 historic accounts, and it's necessary to look at the contra to what history is saying, because history is written by the conquerors, as you know. Interestingly enough, what triggered the curiosity more than anything, as I said in the research, was my journeys to Europe to see how close everything was. And also little weird things like within the Hebrew alphabet is Bet and Nun. In the Ockham alphabet, you've got Bet and Nun. And I went, when I hear these comparisons of language and lettering, is there perhaps a central theme? Doesn't have to be, but it's worthy of the question to see if there is a thread. And knowing, of course, that in the history of this particular story to do with Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and the bloodlines, that Joseph of Arimathea, for example, went to Glastonbury, where a thorn tree was planted that still blooms to this day, according to legend. I'm going, what's the correlation between the two? And of course, knowing about the Bronze Age being to do with copper and to do with tin, I've made the next reference that says 2,000 years of the Bronze Age through the old Silk Road. Where did they go? I've mapped it, seen where the mapping takes me. It brings me through Petra into the Wadi Sik and right down through what's nowadays called Istanbul and Turkey, across into the other lands of China and India. So that's not including the sea routes. So if I take all that into account, I'm getting a bigger picture. Then I take into account things like naming of places. Lyon is one. The fact that Anglesey was called Beaumaris, which means beautiful Mary. How do these fit together as a map pattern? What would be my journey across from what's called Inishmon, which of course is Mona, which was the Druid Isle, before it became Anglesey.
Mm.
And I get in touch with somebody from Anglesey who is an historian associated with place names, because place names give stuff away. And then you follow one of the fields, I don't remember the exact name, but one of the fields in on Mona, which is Anglesey, is named for the blood of the slaughtered.
Named for the slaughtered.
Of the slaughtered to this day. So, and the person who didn't get back to me, an historian on Anglesey, was a fisherman, an angler. So he was, and the reason I mentioned that, he's so fucking normal. So this is not a person interested in conspiracy theories. This is not a person even interested in the information that I've put in Magdalene. This is a person who is simply looking at the place names on Anglesey and what it would have related to in an historic sense. So with place names comes an understanding. What have lions got to do with the Crown of England, for example? Where does it all fit together? So these are the way certain consciousness works, particularly with an autistic brain, is I look for patterns. And those patterns will be in many different layers. The names of people, the fact that Stella Maris was Star of the Sea, the fact that that was Venus, the fact that Venus was associated with the flooding of the Nile, the fact that I can go into the fact that Moses was a title, not a name. I go into Akhenaten, information to do with Akhenaten, which was the only attempt to introduce monotheism into Egypt. What was Egypt called before it was Egypt? It was Kemet. To be able to get the original names and understand this entirety from an animist viewpoint and not from within. Now, just to go one extra step there, when this book was sent across to my editor in America, it went through all these checks and balances. And one of the checks that they do is they outsource the book to one of their readers, an official reader. And when the report came back to my editor, Natalie Harter, I don't have the report anymore. I think I would have torn it up, like I forget names of people I don't like. What they said, the first section, which had to do with the potential names of Mariana and Miriam and Yeshua and Judas and all these other names, were, and this is almost a quote I remember, plausible. The rest of the story was not. When Natalie sent me that, she did send an email going, ha, 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 ha.
You showed me the research.
What I did was to send back to her the information that the Christian idea is that Mary Magdalene, this proclaimed prostitute becoming holy woman, went to Baum in France and lived in a cave, drinking her own tears until she was 63 years old, at which time she was taken up to heaven. Now, what's more believable? What I've put in this book potentially to do with an independent, determined woman who is qualified and trained within her healing practice, might have taken that as rubbish, but the idea of living in a cave and drinking your own tears for 50 years is not rubbish. So this is how invested the intellect of a brainwashed people is in holding on to their mythos, no matter how ridiculous it may seem. Because of that, the book got as far as what they call their vision meeting, which is just before it's published, when Carl Weschke, who was the head of Llewellyn at the time, said, ask Lai for her research. Natalie contacted me and said, can you do an addendum of your research? And my eyes ended up, they widened to my knees. I'd already put a bibliography in there. So I sucked in my gut and I wrote the research based on everything that I possibly could, which includes the names of the Caesars and how ridiculous their deaths were and how short a period of time and how mad some of them were. And that includes the names of the generals, the usurpers, the countries they've been into, the travels that they did. What went into that addendum was particularly, I wasn't going to muck around. I thought, I'm giving you the lot. So the people can make up their own minds. and do their own research. So I only was a piss in the ocean, so to speak. And my interest was in allowing this to open up because I detest the fixity of religion and its influence on consciousness. Then they eventually said, we can't do it. This is a Christian country. That's how bothered people that I know. So bothered people that I know or where I thought the material to be apocryphal. Now, it's only apocryphal from within the viewpoint of a religiosity like Abrahamic religion. It's not apocryphal from a viewpoint of a researcher or a person who's not associated with those religions. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So my opinion of it is it's an interesting topic,
Mm.
but also exploring understandings of initiation, understandings of the idea of underworld, understanding the ideas of a cave, and how the work of, for example, of Lynn Kelly, Dr. Lynn Kelly, and how she's looked at closed systems for initiation processes, the use of different forms of forest mothers, like, for example, Amanita muscaria in the Middle East that was fed to the camels and the urine was drank by the visionaries. That's not including the Hashashim.